This is the DLR Cast, the essential podcast for fans of Diamond David Lee Roth. All right, here we are once again at the DLR Cast. Hey, Happy New Year. Hello, Darren, my partner in crime here at the only and quite possibly number one podcast devoted to Diamond David Lee Roth. What's happening, my friend?
Steve, before I tell you Happy New Year and send well wishes, I think we are still the number one David Lee Roth podcast in the world. If we are wrong about this, we need a correction because there's no fake news here. But happy damn New Year.
Many people say this is the best DLR cast ever.
Many people have told me this.
Many people. It's an amazing thing. It really is. It's amazing. It's amazing.
No talks more about David Lee Roth than we do. No one knows more than we do. Okay, you know what we're doing an impression of. But the bottom line is Happy New Year. Good to connect.
Yeah. It's our first. Well, we're recording the first episode of 2021, and this is episode 21. So there you go. And who do we got? Who do we got coming up in the old interview slot? I know it's a good one.
This is Stacy Jones. I know you're a fan of his band American Hi-Fi, but
oh, yes,
saying Stacy Jones from American Hi-Fi, that's like one of 20 credits for that guy. Like, I think he's still in Matchbox 20 as the drummer. I think he's still Miley Cyrus's music director. He's got his own company, Hi-Fi Labs. I'm guessing you were a fan of him in Veruca Salt and Letters to Cleo.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then I've just a big fan of American Hi-Fi because they totally cover my Power Pop Jones. Great hooks, big guitars. And I know they worked a lot with Butch Walker, who I absolutely just love everything Butch Walker is involved in. So it's a great big Stacy Jones-esque universe for me there.
But it actually, there's a lot of connections to David Lee Roth besides him being a Van Halen and David Lee Roth fan. For example, he did 2 or 3 records with Bob Rock, who did the 91 Roth album, A Lil Ain't Enough. As it's talked about in this interview, Stacy took drum lessons from Greg Bissonette. So I don't know what that term is. Do we just say, if we pretend like this is LinkedIn and we say he's a second degree connection?
I guess so. I mean, I was just thinking I mean, at least every episode somehow is linked back to Greg Bissonette, it seems, of late. So, and for those who are new to the podcast, of course, you can go here what is it? It's episode 15, actually, of the DLR cast, where you had the pleasure of talking with both Greg and his brother, Matt Bissonette. Of course, they're the rhythm section from A Little Ain't Enough, but I digress. But if you're new, check us out and check out the previous episodes.
And one thing that I got to say about this interview is we get a really good Motley Crue story in there because Stacy wrote and Motley Crue related track, and we kind of get the real story on that. And let's face it, there's a good amount of overlap to Motley Crue fans from the Shout at the Devil era as the classic Diamond Dave Van Halen era. I'm not talking out of school there, right?
No, absolutely. Because I mean, I remember in my art class in around 1983-84 out at Riverhead High School, I had one guy doing the back of it next to me in my art class. My one buddy was doing the back of his Levi's jean jacket with the Van Halen logo. And my other buddy across 3 tables away was doing the back of his Lee jean jacket with a big Shout at the Devil pentagram star thing. So it was there was definitely some overlap there.
Nothing but yeah, as the great DLR would say. But I want to pick your brain about something. I'm putting you on the spot here.
All right.
My wife generously bought me a surprise gift a couple days ago. She bought me that special edition Life magazine Van Halen issue, which I don't know if that's on newsstands. If you ever,
it's on newsstands. I've seen it everywhere. I mean, this is the cashing in on Eddie Van Halen, sadly passing away back in October.
Now, I'm going to say it's 85% awesome. There's a lot of photos that maybe you haven't seen before. Great Chuck Klosterman essay in there. But there's some things in there that did not read correct to me. And I want to see if you agree with these assessments.
All right.
Put me on the spot here.
Hit me.
Okay. The first thing, it said on page 48 that Michael Anthony signed away his album sales royalties to 1984. My understanding was he signed away the publishing.
That's what I thought too. But was it just 84 or was it for all the catalog? Because there was a lot of hinky stuff went on and some caveats there, which Mike, being the class act he has not really talked about in a big way that I know of. But yeah, I'm not sure 100%. I think you're right.
And I think this is the culprit of people not understanding publishing and what it is compared to just recordings. This is the real inside baseball, nerdy kind of stuff. Like people hearing the term copyrights and not knowing the difference between the album sales royalties and the composition and all that. Because Van Halen was splitting everything across the board 25% each until this kind of rift happened. And it's my understanding, like, what artist under a record deal would go, yeah, I'm waiving all my royalties? Because he did play on the album. I just think that they're mistaken, and it's the publishing.
Well, wasn't that we'll have to go back, and no doubt someone might, if you follow us or you're checking this out, or you run to Twitter at the DLR cast, well, tweet at us the correct information, because we are definitely not infallible. And as Darren well knows, sometimes I think I've got early onset dementia with my memory. However, if I recall, and let's face it, there's so much information coming at us from all sides here, but there was Michael had to give up a bunch of things to be a part of that ill-fated reunion with Sammy tour in 2004. Is that what they're referring to?
They mention that later on, but they specifically say 84. So, okay, whether or not that...
Wait a minute. You know what? We'll have to go back and research this, because I vaguely remember something about this in Noel Monk's book. But this might be correct.
I don't think it's you signed away the album rights. I think he signed away the publishing, and that's why we see a lot of the amended credits that don't have his name. I think the movies were bad.
I think you're right, because no one's going to sign away what they're getting in royalties on album sales.
Yeah, he would still be under.
Which could be less actually than your publishing. So who the hell knows?
Definitely less, the way that the monkey points go, as they claim. But this one is definitely wrong. It's said that they parted ways with Gary Cherone after the tour. That is not true from what I remember, because didn't they start making a second album with Cherone that Danny Kortchmar how do you say his name?
Kortchmar?
Kortchmar. You're better.
I think.
You're better man than I. And I interviewed him like 6 months ago, and I can't even say his name. They started a second album with him and another producer, right?
Boy, I thought they were writing. I don't know if they actually spent any time in the studio cutting tracks.
Demos, I've read that they did do.
Okay, but nothing like towards what could be of quality enough recording-wise to end up on an album.
Cherone described and named songs. Like there's been a couple interviews with him that have gone around where he actually named what songs were from that. So I just think that they're wrong, and they were kind of just summarizing it they were making it a little too concise about Gary's.
Could be.
There's no mention of Mitch Malloy in this book. There's no mention of Patti Smythe. There's no mention of the Twister soundtrack, which weren't those the last two things that they did before Hagar left after the Balance touring and all that?
I believe you're right. And was that after the two songs end up the two new songs from Sammy on the greatest hits? I can't remember the timeline on that.
I thought,
and we had talked about this on a previous DLR cast, because I always go back to one of my favorite Van Halen songs is "Humans Being," which Sammy wasn't he really unhappy about having to write songs for a soundtrack? I think that, right? I mean, does that ring a bell too?
That part I didn't heard. My friend Joe once told me a story I can attribute to where it is, that supposedly the song that Eddie and Alex were doing for the Twister soundtrack was supposed to be like Van Halen's Stairway to Heaven. And it just, at a certain point, they lost the plot, and it's like, yeah, here's a throwaway instrumental jam.
When you think of it, and as usual, we go down some different avenues here, that 96 ill-fated reunion with Dave on the MTV Awards stage, 96 to about 2004, that is like the darkest, cloudiest time period for Van Halen, right? I mean,
yeah,
there was definitely some addiction issues there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back. I remember reading something recently that when Eddie was first diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, oh, wow, that's even earlier than I thought it was. So maybe there was something in there. I mean, I know he had hip surgery, I think it was. I mean, Sharon's in and out. That's like a really dark period. And then you don't hear anything. And all of a sudden, 2007, they're back with Dave and Wolfie's in the band. It's like, that's like the third chapter, right? Or fourth chapter, whatever, where it was smooth sailing from what we all saw with new music and 3 tours from 2007 to 17 or 6, somewhere around there. So, I mean, but that time period there, whenever we talk about this stuff, it's hazy for me because, I mean, at that point, I was so really invested in whatever Dave was doing, and he wasn't doing too much. You had the DLR band in '98, right? And you had the covers album that came out after that sometime, and the No Holds Barbecue. So, I mean, he wasn't exactly hugely active. So, I mean, that whole almost a decade time period is just a hazy, dark kind of like, what the hell was going on here with Van Halen time period?
And then one other thing that I took issue with, putting aside that they don't talk at all about Dave's solo career and his contributions, they kind of cut Dave free in this Time Life thing between 85 and him coming. I guess they mentioned the 2 songs on the Greatest Hits of 96, but then they don't really say anything until really the 07, 08 regrouping and all that. But there's nothing about Sammy and Dave's tour in there. I guess if you're going to focus on Eddie, sure. I think that it's an instrumental thing with that whole process. But I don't love this narrative that everyone has that Dave was fired because he was going to make the movie and it's a solo thing, and that when he asked Eddie to score his movie, that was the final straw and that was over, because Eddie scored the movie The Wildlife, and he scored a TV movie for Valerie Bertinelli called The Seduction of Gina. I think that's the name of it. So this whole narrative that like, oh, no one could do anything solo. He scored 2 movies.
Yeah, but also too, I mean, did Dave walk or was Dave fired? You know? Sure.
Either way, this Life magazine kind of thing, it looks cool. There's not a lot of photos that you saw all the time. There's a lot of stuff from 1978 in Europe. I don't know if they just bought somebody's archive they licensed just one archive, but there's a lot of cool 1978, 1979 stuff. And then, like you see the few photos of them roller skating, but I never saw them roller skating in Japan before. Did you ever see that?
No, but I have seen the roller skating stuff. Yeah, but not in Japan.
So unless it was just an alternate photo. So it's well done. Does it have a price tag here? There's no price tag. I'm not judging how much my wife spends.
It's the thought that counts, Darren.
But the bottom line is, I just say, if you're going to throw together a tribute like this, just make sure your facts are right. And don't disparage Gary Cherone that much. I mean, leave Gary alone.
I do want to get it. I knew Chuck Klosterman wrote something in, and I like his writing. So, yeah. And I know he's a big Van Halen fan. So that, to me, would be worth the price of admission.
His essay is pretty good. He talks, I'm not going to say what it is, but he talks about his favorite Van Halen songs. Like he makes a playlist and he justifies why each is each. And there's one writer's take in there, I can't remember their name offhand, which is actually a refreshing look into Eddie's genius. But if you were buying this to learn about things that you didn't know, not so much. You and I, the savants, we know all of it. You know, the part about Eddie liked the microwaved hot dogs, like we knew about that.
Sometimes the minutia I can't keep up with. You know, I mean, I'm more concerned most of the time, I think, on the music and the more music-related minutiae. On that end, we want to thank, I can't remember who it was, but somebody corrected us at Twitter about the song Mississippi Power as far as the release of that. Now I just completely spaced on what the damn tweet said. See, there we go. I mean, 15 minutes on this intro or so, you know, I'm already getting a memory lapse. See, this is what I'm talking about, folks. I apologize.
Well, the bottom line is I really appreciate everyone who takes the time to listen to the show. When you do a podcast, you're kind of in a vacuum. You never know, like, do people actually care about this? But every week, it's just more people are grasping onto this. And the more years you're kind of sad that there wasn't already a podcast about David Lee Roth out there.
Yeah, and you know what? You got a good story about Dave Van Halen. Tweet us at the DLR cast, and we'd love to chat with you about it, because that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast. That for all that we know, there's so much that we don't know, and or there's so much that we think. And we brought this up in the other interview. I mean, this is part of the reason, one of the biggest reasons why we started this podcast. And remember, this started months before Eddie died, of course, and there were always going to have some Van Halen element to this. But, you know, you and I really talked about this and kind of came up with the idea that Dave's solo stuff isn't really recognized that much anymore. I mean, people pretty much go, oh, yeah, Eat 'Em and Smile blew me away, and then there was Skyscraper. It's like, hold on, wait a minute. I'm not saying that Filthy Little Mouth is the equivalent of Abbey Road here, but there's some good stuff on there. You know what I mean? It's like I still want to know what he's doing creatively anyway, even if it's not music, as we've seen with the paintings, right? I mean, the illustrations that he's been pretty that keeps coming out very regularly. On that end of things, you know what would be really cool? I would love to see all those illustrations be a part of some sort of big coffee table book.
I'm with you there. Well, I guess we'll have to start a campaign to tweet at him while tweeting show account in there, so we know that Dave knows about the show while knowing that he has to make this merchandise. So everyone needs to get on that one. For the Stacy Jones fans, thank you for listening to this much talk about non-Stacy Jones stuff before you get to hear Stacy Jones talk. And man, one of the nicest guys you'll ever hear speak that you could ever interview. So we go a little inside baseball. So thanks for tolerating that. Indeed. Very cool. Thanks a lot. Hey, Stacy, right on time. Can you hear me okay?
Yo.
Hey, thanks so much for doing this. This is my third Stacy Jones interview, and like life just keeps getting better. Am I right?
I don't know about that. Nice to see you, Darren. How are you?
Great. And yourself there, aside from the world blowing up?
Yeah, we're doing all right, man.
Yeah, exactly. So putting together all the pieces here, when I look at your musical chronological discography, chronology, whatever we want to call it here, I know that your first touring gig was with a reggae band. And that has nothing to do with Atwater Punks. That has nothing to do with your Berkeley music training. There's nothing to do with American Hi-Fi, which was kind of like a power pop, punk pop kind of thing. There's nothing to do with Matchbox 20, Miley Cyrus, etc. Yeah. But what I kind of get is that you are rooted in the Van Halen, Motley Crue school of music, and that's where it started. Do I have that right?
1,000,000%. Yeah. I was definitely so like junior high and high school, I was a total metalhead. So that was like the pop metal stuff, like Van Halen, Motley Crue, Rat, Dokken. Like I loved that stuff. But I also loved like Maiden, Metallica, that world. But then also I was really into like U2, INXS, that sort of stuff as well. So I mean, I grew up in a family that listened to a ton of music as a kid. So, I've always been open to everything. Like my dad loved, Miles Davis, but also the Beatles and the Stones and the Eagles. And the first concert I ever saw was ABBA, so like I've always had an open mind when it came to music. If it's good and if it resonates with me, then I'm all in. But I find that there's two different Stacy Joneses. The Stacy Jones that does music is generally serious. There's not Flavor of the Week is funny in a way, but it's very serious otherwise in your discography. But then everyone I know who knows you or who's encountering you goes, oh man, that guy is funny. And I don't know about that. Well, Mark Stepro, et cetera, they all think you're funny. Okay. They all like you. And that's tend to be a compliment. And when I've spoken with you at different times beyond interviews, which you don't have to remember, that's okay. There's always been kind of like a DLR humor kind of thing. There's been good one-liners and all that. So all right, now you're putting me on the spot to be funny. Now I don't know what to do. Well, that's not the plan here. The plan is to point out that have you had to intentionally restrain the humor from the music, or does that not even come up? I hate comedy in music. Wow. So like, I'm not a Zappa fan. Like, I appreciate Zappa and those musicians. Like, I think that's, it's insane what they do. I don't like it. It doesn't resonate with me. I don't like Tenacious D. I don't love musicals. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I like to go see a musical. If I'm in the theater, I love it. But like, I'm not someone that puts on really theatrical stuff. And so those are the two sides of music that don't resonate with me, is like comedy and like really ultra theatrical stuff doesn't. And that goes true. That's true for like metal too. Like, I don't like those bands that are really technical and kind of theatrical, like Dream Theater and that kind of stuff. Again, total respect for their musicianship, just doesn't resonate with me.
But you do love Hot for Teacher, and let's face it, that's a funny song.
That's incredible. I mean, who doesn't? It's so funny because this morning, I just pulled up Spotify and was just listening to Van Halen prior to talking to you. And like, one of the things that I realized was that, I was more of a Tommy Lee guy. Like, Tommy Lee was my favorite drummer from that world. There was something about his playing that like really, again, resonated with me and spoke to me. I love his power. I love his parts. I love the grease that he has. He has that Bonham kind of thing going, really heavy foot. But Alex is one of those drummers that I always admired and loved. And like, one of the things that you can say about Alex is like, as soon as you hear that snare drum, it's him, And so for a drummer to be able to like have a sound that is like identifiable within the first 4 bars, of the song is pretty remarkable. That's not everybody gets to do that. And it's interesting, like, as I was listening through to some of this stuff, one of the reasons I think I gravitated more towards Tommy when I was a kid was also I understood him more. Like, there's so many things that Van Halen does rhythmically. Like, one of the things I think I just discovered is like, they do every pre-chorus, not every, but lots of their pre-choruses leading into the chorus. Alex does this weird beat displacement shit, and it stays in 4/4. But like, if like you listen to like Panama, or I think Unchained, they do it. Even Jump, I think he does a small little thing, but he always does these little things in the pre-chorus where you kind of like, you're like, wait, what's going on? And then the chorus lands and he just lays it in there. And it's like incredible. It's that like release, it's like that tension and release, right? And I think that's so incredible. And as a kid, a lot of times I didn't know what the fuck they were doing. You know what I mean? And I didn't like take the time to like slow the record down and learn everything note for note because I was too lazy, quite frankly. So I was just kind of like, shout at the devil. I could, I could just bang away with my headphones on and not have to think about it quite as much.
One of the things that David Lee Roth has started to say a lot in the past few years is that Van Halen put the rumba in rock and roll. And he usually says that when he's playing Jamie's Crying. And I was thinking about that, and it's true, but do you think that they noticed it at the time? Or do you think he just heard it 1,000 times and went, that is kind of different?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, as somebody that's been in a band and been a musician my whole life, like I kind of know what it's like when you're in the room with other guys, like crafting a song, and so are those moments intentional where they're like, hey, in this pre-chorus, let's fuck them up going into the chorus. Like, let's get weird, like, did they make that? Was that a conscious decision, or was it just like what happened? Like Eddie started playing this thing and Alex just went with it. The two of them rhythmically is such an interesting and totally unique thing in music, and I think like them being brothers probably has a lot to do with it. And they both just like, I mean, two guys that just completely carved out their own, niche, which I think is incredible, Well,
an interesting thing to me about your career is a lot of the people that have been referenced or related to stuff we've referenced, you've worked with. I don't know if it's true. You could just like give me a nod if it's not true that you played on that Motley Crue compilation in 04 or 05, or you somehow contributed to that. Okay.
I wrote a song with Nikki for the Red, White, and Crew box set.
Okay.
And what happened was, I think, so Bob Rock was producing a couple of new songs. And Bob Rock had just done the first American Hi-Fi record.
Yes.
And I think Nicky and Bob were hanging out, and Bob was playing him some of the Hi-Fi record, and Nicky was like, oh, this is cool, and Bob was like, you should call Stacy to write a song. So I get a phone call from Nicky Sixx, like out of the blue. And I was like, is this real? Like, what's happening right now? And, he was basically like, hey, I got your number from Bob. We want to write some new songs for this box set. So I'll try to I'll do a truncated version of this story. But basically, Nicky came to the studio. We spent a couple, 2 or 3 sessions writing this song, and we demoed it. And so Nicky came to my studio and demoed it. I played drums. Jamie from Hi-Fi played guitar. Nicky played bass. And then I sang the vocal, right? And then it just kind of like disappeared. And then, I saw Nicky here and there at shows or whatever. And then one day we were in the studio, actually. I think Hi-Fi was in the studio at Sunset Sound, might have been we were making our second album, or maybe we were doing a one-off thing. But again, phone rings. It's Nicky. And he's like, hey, we're recording that song today, and Vince is not around. Can you come sing the vocal while Tommy and I cut basics, for the song? We need like a guide vocal, So I was like, hell yeah. So Jamie actually came with it. He's like, I'm going with you, dude. So we went down to cello or wherever it was. And so Tommy and Nicky were there. DJ Ashba was playing guitar because Mick had just had like a hip surgery or something. So I stood in the vocal booth while they recorded this song. And like, it was incredible. So I got to sing with them. And then at one point, Tommy stopped and he's like, hey, Bob. He's like, I keep fucking up going into the bridge. He's like, can you play the demo back? He's like, I want to learn that fill that Stace played going into the bridge. And I was just like, like my head exploded. First of all, he called me Stace. Secondly, here's Tommy Lee learning one of my drum parts, when I like have made a career from learning his.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the song ended up on the box set, except it didn't make it on the US pressing because they didn't like the mix. So they had to remix it, and then it went on the box set for like the worldwide version. So it's kind of like an exclusive track out there.
That definitely confuses a music publisher with your contract fulfillment deal for MDRC to get really nerdy on you. But but Bob Rock, who we've now said the name of 12 times, you've played on 2 or 3 different albums that he's produced, but he produced Dave's 1991 album, A Little Ain't Enough. Did you ever press him for a David Lee Roth story or two?
I didn't even know that he produced that.
Oh.
I'm going to have to go back and listen to that now.
It's some people love the album, some people don't, but the music video for A Little Ain't Enough, I don't know if Dave has made a better music video than that one.
I can't remember. I'm going to have to, I'll go look at it after. It's, it's funny, all the records that Bob has done that like people, like I didn't know. Well, the first time I went to his studio, he has a loft in his studio. And so I went up in the loft, and there's like all these guitars and stuff. And there's literally like not 100, there's probably 50 gold and platinum plaques, records. They're on the ground. They're dusty. The glass is cracked. They're like, one of them, like the record had the gold record had like peeled back, from the inside. You know what I mean? They were just like in disarray. And I was just like, how many fucking albums have you made in your life? Like, it's incredible. All this stuff that, you don't necessarily know. And they're huge albums, People know him for Metallica, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi did a little bit. But like, Bob also has had some huge hits with Michael Bublé. Like
the Canadian connection. I tell you, the Canadian music industry, we're so out of the loop on, and there's all these artists that are 15 times Canadian platinum, and they've never toured the States, and we lose track. Like the Tragically Hip, one of the biggest bands ever in Canada, and who?
Yep. I have an Alex Van Halen story because of a Canadian band, Our Lady Peace.
Okay, so before you tell me that, everyone in the world seems to like Stacy Jones and Rain from Our Lady Peace. These are the two names that you don't ever hear like, oh man, and he threw a tantrum and I just won't work with that guy again.
Oh, I've thrown some tantrums. Oh yeah.
Is the Our Lady Peace story related to Rain or?
Well, no. So it's related. So Jeremy, the drummer of Our Lady Peace, is still to this day a great friend of mine. Our Lady Peace, their first U.S. tour was they were first on a bill that the band Sponge was headlining. Ned's Atomic Dustbin was right before Sponge. Letters to Cleo was before Ned's, and Our Lady Peace opened for us. So that was a bill in like 90
record. Yeah.
Yeah. And nobody knew our OLP yet. You know, they hadn't broken yet. They weren't on the radio yet. I think they started getting radio play during that tour. But so yeah, that was in 93. So Jeremy and I have been friends ever since. He moved to LA for a while, and you know, so we're buddies. I mean, I was texting with him yesterday. So I don't remember what band I was in at the time, but I had a day off in New York, and Our Lady Peace was opening for Van Halen at Jones Beach. So Jeremy hit me up and was like, hey, do you want to come to the show? And I was like, fuck yeah, of course I do. And I had never seen Van Halen prior to that. Like as a kid, I saw Motley Crue a bunch. I saw all the other bands we mentioned, you know, Rat and
Rough Cut. I know you're a Rough Cut guy.
Rough Cut. I saw Rough Cut open for somebody. I can't remember who, like maybe Dio.
Probably, yeah.
But I had never seen Van Halen. So I was like, yeah, I'm all in, you know? And not only was I going to get to see them, but probably go backstage and whatever. So, so here's how I remember the story. Maybe you'll have to cross-reference this with Jeremy and see how he remembers it.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, my phone's blowing up.
No problem. I haven't interviewed Jeremy yet, but their publicist is a Long Island person, so you never know what's going to happen.
Dude, I'll connect. You should totally interview him for this. You want to talk about funny? He's one of the funniest dudes I know. And he probably has a million Alex Van Halen stories. I'll connect you guys.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So I've interrupted you. And by the way, you didn't get it to take a sip of your tea because I keep cutting you off.
No, this is my third cup.
Break.
This is my third cup. I don't need any more. All right, one more.
So to recap, you go to the Jones Beach show there on Long Island because everything comes back to Long Island, Van Halen, and Stacy Jones being a nice guy. Yes.
So we go to the show. We're hanging out at Soundcheck, and so I'm just sitting on a road case next to Alex's kit while he's like noodling around. Right? Eddie comes out, starts noodling around. Jeremy and I both wear glasses, and we both had like these kind of big, you know, like this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Big giant glasses. So Eddie's tech walks over to us and is like, "Hey, if you're gonna watch Soundcheck, Eddie says you have to wear this." And he like put like white tape on our glasses, like Revenge of the Nerds style. And so I was like, all right, they're already fucking with me already. I've only been here for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So anyway, they could have been like nicer dudes, and like they were sound checking. DLR never. I don't think he came out. Actually, wait, this would have been Sammy, right?
If it's 93, it's Sammy.
This would have been Sammy. So Sammy didn't come out. It was just the band. And like, you know, they were just playing tunes, and Eddie would just come over and like stop playing and like ask me questions. Like I literally was just sitting on a road case, like talking to Eddie Van Halen during sound check. So after sound check, we went back behind the kit with Jeremy, and we were talking with Alex, and Jeremy's like, "Hey, tell him the story about when you caught on fire." And Alex was like, "Oh yeah, man." So apparently, and again, you're gonna have to cross-reference this with Jeremy. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I may have had a couple Bud Lights during sound check. So this is how I remember it. Alex, you know, we all know he used to reach down, pick up the thing and the beater and light the gong on fire.
Yes.
And smash the gong, right? That was like a big thing. So at one point, Alex was wearing like a long sleeve, like polyester shirt, you know? And he's like, I remember wearing it, and I kept having to roll the sleeves up. It was driving me crazy. But when he reached back to do the gong bit, some of the flame stuff, you know, whatever he was using, kerosene probably, who knows, right? Dripped onto his shirt. and caught his shirt on fire a little bit. Now, he didn't realize it at the time, and he sat back down and started playing, and then he was like, oh shit, my shirt is on fire. So he looks down at his drum tech, who I don't know who it was at the time. It was not John Douglas, who also I have a connection to. John Douglas is Alex's tech now. John hired me to work at a drum shop when I was in high school. He was the manager of a drum shop in Houston, Texas. And I worked at the store, just like stocking drum heads. And John was in a band called XOX. They were like a big band in Houston at the time, like kind of glam metal. And John is a phenomenal drummer, by the way, an incredible artist as well, and has been with Alex for many years. Anyway, so Alex realizes he's on fire, but he's playing. So he looks at his tech and he's like, I'm on fire, right? And what I remember is the tech was like doing a bong hit or something, and like looked up at him and was like, looks great, man. Like this kind of vibe, right? And Alex was like, ah. And like, so he jumps off the kit. And rather than the tech attending to Alex and like put him out, the tech jumped on the drum set and finished the song.
Wow.
That's how I remember that story.
That was on the 93-ish tour?
He told me the story then. The story happened like many, many years ago.
Well, every time you kept saying that he was on fire, I'm thinking of the Van Halen song, I'm on fire. It's kind of hard to like not laugh at that irony right there, but
he was fine. He ended up being fine because the shirt was so thick and stuff. Like I don't think it really like burned him. And I just think it's hilarious that the tech was like, oh shit, I better get on the kit rather than like put the fire out.
Well, that leads me to another question. I'm just guessing. One of my big obsessions is the hidden offstage players in different classic metal bands. You know, Ozzy's had them, Kiss has had them.
Yeah.
U2, it's known they have a dude that's been on off stage or below the stage for 30 years. It's kind of the norm with that kind of stuff. And I remember reading that Eddie Van Halen had a keyboard player on the side of the stage who I think was his guitar tech. Now, does this mean that the people who teched for Van Halen were as good as Van Halen and could just all do the show in a second flat?
I mean, some of them. I know one guy that was a guitar tech for Eddie, and I'm blanking on his name right now because he teched for Hi-Fi in the early days, and he could shred every lick that Eddie ever played. Yeah, like, yes. I think a lot of times, it's funny. I don't think there's a lot of in between, because I know a lot of techs that are really great at the instrument they tech for, or they're fucking horrendous. And you're like, how are you up there like hitting the drums like that? Like you're not like, come on. You know what I mean? Like your Chad Smith is tech. I'm just making that up. I don't even know who Chad Smith's tech is. But like you're watching phenomenal drummer every night, but then you get up there and you're like, psh, like you can't even like make the sound, you know? So I don't think there's much middle ground. I think they're either rippers or they totally suck.
Was the tech for Eddie you were talking about before Zeke?
No, Keegan. Was that his last name? I think his last name was Keegan, and we called him Keegan. That's what's coming back to me right now.
Because I heard a story. Do you know Steve Brown from Trickster?
No, I've never met any of those guys.
Oh, okay. Well, there's some footage of him on I think it's the 88 tour when Van Halen was playing Madison Square Garden. And there wasn't really security barricades or anything like that. And he saw that the tech was Zeke. And he said, oh, he doesn't manhandle anybody. And he snuck on stage and just started finger tapping on Eddie's guitar. And Eddie just laughed. And then they gently took him off stage.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was curious if at that point in time it was still the same guy or anything like that. So with the Dave solo catalog, feel free to say no, not really into it. But are you a big Eat 'em and Smile guy or Skyscraper?
Oh yeah. I mean, I took drum lessons from Greg Bissonette for years.
What?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love Greg.
Wow. Okay. So which era would that have been?
So I started studying with Greg probably in 2006 or 7, maybe. And he lived, we had a mutual friend that connected us, and Greg is like one of those guys that like, he teaches, but like just kind of like it's kind of on the side. You know, it's not like he's like advertising like, hey, come take lessons with me. You know what I mean? Like if you have an in, I think you can do it. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I love that record. That record like changed my life to a degree, because it was like I sort of learned like what a session guy was from that album. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, who are these guys that are playing in a band with Dave now? You know what I mean? And I think it opened up a whole new world, and I started like investigating Greg and found out like he's a phenomenal, you know, big band and jazz drummer. Greg Bissonette is one of the best drummers on the planet, and he can play any style of music completely authentically. So like, you know, whatever, you know, all the stuff he's done, and like he can play some super technical double bass metal, you know, freak out, and then drop into this like New Orleans groove that sounds like Zigaboo, like exactly. You know what I mean? It's like incredible. Yeah.
You ever hear the version of Panama that he played on for Pat Boone on the Pat Boone metal album?
No.
Well, that's part one.
I remember that record though.
Oh, it's a great record. And
I gotta listen to that. Yeah.
And if you like Eat 'Em and Smile, have you ever listened to that album in Spanish? The Spanish version, Sonrisa Salvaje?
No, I know that existed as well. I didn't listen to it.
Stock questions I have to ask. A lot of the people who listen to this kind of make fun of my love of that album, but I was asking Michael Sweet from Stryper earlier today about, like, do you plan on recording an album in Spanish?
Hey, hold on. You were talking with Michael Sweet earlier today?
You were interview number 3 of 4 today. I'm a little bit of an over-interviewer.
I love Stryper. Stryper was like one of the shows, again, that like, they were so good. I caught a Bible at the show. I remember I caught a Bible, and then I brought it home, and I'm not a religious person, whatever, but I brought it home, and I had a waterbed at the time, and waterbeds had these little like cubbies, you know, at the back that you could put stuff in. So I remember like I put the Bible there with like 2 like Stryper cassettes like on top of it as a display. That was like what I had. Yeah.
I don't blame you. When you go down the list of, I hate saying hair metal, but the hair metal bands that are actually really legit bands that you don't lump in with the others that are legit good, you can still listen to. I say you got Stryper, Rat, White Lion, Dokken.
Yep.
There's kind of like 6 of them, and Stryper's one of them.
Totally agree.
And I'm Jewish. I don't even.
Totally agree. I love Stryper. Love Robert Sweet. Great drummer.
Yeah. So I was asking him if he ever had plans to record an album in Spanish, you know, based on Sonrisa Salvaje, and surprisingly he said, "Oh yeah, actually I do. I want to do that."
That's
Did
awesome.
they ever make you record hi-fi stuff in another language?
We never did. No. I mean, you know, it would have been so hard for me to do. I spoke a little French when I was a kid, so maybe I could have pulled that off. But I mean, I think it's awesome that people can do that. I mean, that's incredible.
Got it. So steering things a little bit away, did I read correctly that you develop apps or technology related stuff, Hi-Fi Labs?
Hi-Fi Labs is a company, that I just co-founded this year. And it's a really cool company. It's something that had sort of been in the works for a couple of years. And, we were lucky enough to fund it right at the beginning of the year. And so it's basically a company that we're focused on 2 things. One is like true artist development. So being able to work with musicians that, you know, major labels, things that major labels used to do like 30 years ago. Now I think there's a big trend in the industry that's like, if you don't have, 500,000 followers on Instagram, or you're not blowing up on TikTok, then labels aren't interested, right? And so Hi-Fi Labs was created to be able to find those musicians that are making incredible music, maybe in their bedroom in Toledo, Ohio, and they have they don't have any friends or family that are in the business. And so that's why we made this, why we started this company, was to be able to find those artists and then develop them, invest in them, and, watch their careers, flourish, quite frankly. And, one of the reasons I wanted to do that is, I've had like 8 major label record deals in my career,
Yeah, you're not exaggerating right there.
Yeah. So, and like I've seen the benefits to that and the pitfalls. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to kind of bring some of that experience into this company and give that back to some other artists. And we have an incredible team that we built out and are signing our first artist as we speak, actually.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. In not giving anything away, but you're skewing towards younger artists that haven't had deals, or would you guys be open to label services kinds of things where people who survived the majors?
Yep. So we're not doing any like label services. So like directly, we're not a management company. We're not a label. We're not an agency. We're sort of a creative think tank and an A&R resource, I guess. But we do wear those hats also, so we do have project managers and we do have people to do A&R, but we also have an in-house, software developer, an engineer, so that if, we just built, I don't know if I can say this. Probably, I don't know if I can say, maybe I can. Anyway, we've worked with a couple of really big artists just recently and one big company recently. And we literally, to your point, we built them the technology so that they can own it and the artist can own that technology and own that platform. So it's really cool. Yeah, so there's 2 sides to the company. There's the artist development side, and then there's the side that is like, we're just a one-stop shop creative think tank. So if you have an idea, some way that you want to try to break through the noise, we want to be someone that can help you, facilitate that.
And to be clear, that software is not David Lee Roth's visual comic book that came out 3 weeks ago?
That is not. I wish it was. No.
There you go. So recapping everything.
Yeah.
The Van Halen world is not too far cut off from you because of Bob Rock and sharing some texts over the years. Van Halen was an influential band. You love Eat 'Em and Smile. You had a good story of Alex Van Halen lighting himself on fire accidentally. And that was the first time you'd seen Van Halen, like 1993 or so. You like Stryper. You still like Rough Cut. Is there any Van Halen territory? And this is the last thing I'll ask, being mindful of your time here. A lot of the interviews I've done recently with, say, Desmond Child or Butch Vig, it seems like everybody was reached out to by Van Halen for some reason, like, hey, we're thinking of using outside songwriters, we're thinking of using outside musicians, etc. Was there ever a point when you were at your hottest in the mainstream sense that somebody from Van Halen nearly reached out to you?
Nope, never had any contact with anyone from Van Halen. Yeah.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but...
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
It seems like, though, that they reached out to a lot of people, and it's only after Eddie passed that all these stories started coming out.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have been able to add any value to anything Van Halen was doing. Like it's like, to me, it's such a perfect. I mean, and I love 5150. I love the Hagar stuff too. Mm-hmm. I just think that they're one of those bands that. Yeah, like if they called me and said, "Hey, we want you to do something," I would be too scared to do it. Like I don't think I wouldn't want to walk into that,
And it doesn't sound to me like there's a lot of bands that you'd feel that way about. Like if Kiss called, you could do something, right?
Sure. Oh yeah. No, I'm not scared of Kiss. No. I think but yeah, Van Halen, I mean, like I said, they were just some of the rhythms and the technical stuff they did was just so, beyond what my brain does naturally that I just don't think I could ever add any value there.
Well, like Howard Stern says, you've said it all, you've done it all, that kind of thing. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you for all this insight and years of knowledge and pulling. And great to see Hi-Fi Labs is fighting the good fight for musicians.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, pleasure to see you, Darren. Always happy to chat.